Welcome, everyone, to this session on locally led development. My name is Gavin Krugel, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Frontiers, which is a comprehensive capacity building specialist organization. To set the scene for today's conversation, to just put a couple points across. It's in my view, for the sustainable development goals and especially digital development to succeed, we need local capabilities and human connections. Without local capacity, the global development league of professionals is too small for us to achieve the ambitious goals that we've set. Local capabilities gaps will trip up any good intentioned global digital development initiative, and that comprehensive sustainable capacity building should form a foundational part of any intervention. With that, I'd like to introduce today's conversation, how local capacity building initiatives in Mozambique have strengthened and elevated locally led digital development, and to introduce and welcome our speakers today. First, Esselina Macome, who is the CEO of FSD Mozambique. FSD Mozambique works on several diverse interventions on financial sector deepening in Mozambique. Sarah Corley, who is the CEO of the Alliance of Digital Finance Professionals, who is the representative body of the global digital finance profession. And João Gaspar, who is the president of the Fintech Association of Mozambique. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for spending time with us this morning. Esselina, I'd like to perhaps start with you, a brief conversation about Mozambique when we met just over 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, when we started talking about how capacity gaps in Mozambique were slowing financial inclusion. Perhaps, we can give some context. What was it like before? So what was the problem? What problem did the capabilities or capacity gaps actually cause? And what were the capacity gaps in Mozambique 7 years ago?
Okay. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Gavin, for this introduction and for the very important questions that you are stating to me this morning. If I'm recalling the years back when we initiated this movement of financial inclusion, in particular when we take the digital as the driver of the financial inclusion, the question for capability or for capacity skills was in the top, because we do need to have people who are capable to design specific products that are aligned with the need of the specific segments. And you can't have all people that are aligned or design those products if they are skilled. And all of us, we know that skill in design are a challenge, not only for Mozambique, but also skill in managing digital tools and digital technology. And it was that time that we decided to partner with the DFI in order to bring this skills level among first to the financial service provider, employees from there. Secondly, also for creating those environments for debate, because we believe that skills is not just in classroom or in course, but mostly the exchange of experience and the dialogue, debate, specific topic. So when we started, really, the skill on digital was slack, but mostly the question of how to design digital financial service product to specific segment is also a challenge, continue being a challenge. And the human-centered design approach, which also DFI is using when we have discourse on digital product, is also a challenge. So Gavin, is where I can say in the starting that this issue of scarce of digital skills is not only for Mozambique, but it's a global program. And you can imagine in a country where the level of education is lower, that problem might be even more seen compared for developing country or for other country. But we do believe that with this program, we are trying to minimize. So Gavin, I'm stopping here. I don't know if what further question in terms of our conversation that you have, because otherwise then I can't deviate for other components.
Yeah. No, not at all. Thank you for that, Esselina. Let me just add, going back to our conversations and all the way back then, what we found is that we had skills in financial services, right? We had deep skills in financial services. So there was no lack of a skills base in financial services. And on the other side of the fence, we had skills in digital, but specifically more technical skills like mobile network operators and telcos and systems providers. But we didn't really have the bridge. So the financial skills meeting the digital skills in a way that finance and technology could come together to innovate and to provide solutions to the broad Mozambican population. And that bridge is really the capabilities or the capacity gap that we needed to solve. So we had financial services experts, and to a degree we had digital experts, but we didn't have digital finance experts. And that, that capacity gap was there, was the problem that we needed to solve, that we were too reliant on foreign consultants, which were expensive, and their interventions were short-lived, and didn't really leave capacity on the ground. But there was, even in the finance sector, there was a challenge, and that was that the shallow specialist talent pool resulted in frequent senior staff attrition. So you'd have churn in what few staff members that you could find or employees that we could find. There was this churn, this rapid churn. And I remember some of the research that we did showed that it was as quick as 9 months. So the retention of an employee in the financial sector was as quick as 9 months before they moved on. And they were moving on because of the shallow talent pool, and people were offering higher salaries. So the rising employment costs of the shallow talent pool just exacerbated the fact that we had this capacity gap sitting in the financial services space between digital and finance. So I just wanted to add some of the pains, not only lack of digital skills, but the pains with rising employment costs.
Yeah, Gavin, I think the way that you bring us a bridge of digital and financial, and now we're talking about the digital financial service, and this is where we are trying to contribute, because as I said in the beginning, we have agreed, or we have recognized that in order to improve financial inclusion, the digital has a key component, and the digital financial service as there. In this component of bridging and the lack of skills, you are right when you are saying that the rotation of employees is going higher, because if you have very few people who are skilled, and you need all the financial service provider that need those skills, then you end up making inflation, if I can say, inflation in terms of salary and the recruiting and the people that are not stable. And I do believe that the course like that you are offering also help in order to stabilize a little bit of how relating this new environment, and also the issue that you are creating a new element within the ecosystem of financial service. Now I'm talking about the fintechs, because fintechs is an example of this bridging of digital the financial system or technology in there. So how do you make those new elements also working in that space? So if you go in that big view of digital technology and financial service, you can see many are coming from there. We have been talking here about skills, but also when you go further in the skills, you will bring the academies, employees, new graduates that are going to be the new ready to working in the environment. And you are seeing
Esselina, we're losing you on connectivity, I think. That's not me. We're losing you on connectivity, but not to worry. While we get Esselina back, let us, perhaps turn off your video, Esselina. Okay, while we get Esselina back, let me just sum up there in the couple minutes that we have on this question that, there was this gap 7 years ago, gap between financial services and digital. There was a shallow pool of talent that was constantly churning and rising and causing increasing employment costs. And really, this meant that financial inclusion or even financial innovation was really slowed in Mozambique. Let me bring Sarah, Sarah and João, feel free to also jump in here. Let's talk a little bit about the intervention, right? What did we now do? So I can add, just from the Digital Frontiers Institute perspective, how we worked with FSD Mozambique 7 years ago. So what we did is we created foundational training in digital money, and we created training that went beyond and showed the Mozambique professionals what digital money looked like in the world's leading markets. We then created a set of specializations that, depending on who they were, regulator, business operator, technology innovator, operations, they could follow a stream of specialist training to specialize in a specific area, and eventually pull all of that together to certify as a certified digital finance practitioner. In the process, we trained as many as 115, I believe, professionals in Mozambique. So Mozambique is relatively small country, so 115 professionals now moving from either digital or financial skills to digital financial skills, and specifically inclusive finance skills. And that's over the period of the last 5 to 7 years that we've worked with FSD Mozambique as partners in the country. But that was just one intervention, right? That was just the training component. What we were clear on, even with, including with Esselina's guidance, who had a role in academia at the time, what we were clear on is that the digital classroom is not going to be enough to create capability. So spending time in an online environment wasn't enough to create capabilities. In fact, online training wasn't suited to creating capabilities, and that we had to blend online training with connecting Mozambican professionals to other peer professionals in the online classroom from around the world so that they could learn from each other, but very importantly, connecting them in person in local markets. So Sarah, perhaps, if I've covered the digital learning experience and the kind of curricula that was introduced, you can give us a bit of an overview on intervention from a continuous professional development perspective and why that mattered.
Sure. Thank you, Gavin. So I think, as Esselina also alluded when she was speaking earlier, that online learning is great. It gives you certainly a base level of knowledge and information, but actually being able to discuss that with your peers, to discuss what that means for you in your country, and to contextualize that information. So we know that there are different cultures, contexts, social economic statuses, regulations, etc. So being able to discuss that with people in the same country as you, and discuss, debate, share, learn with each other is really key. So when we're looking at continuous professional development, we're looking at a number of things, both locally within Mozambique, but also globally as well, to make sure that we're not just having conversations within country, but we're having globally. So what at the Digital Frontiers Institute we did was start to really try and understand and engage the concept of peer-to-peer learning. So we introduced a community of practice, which Esselina and João both facilitated and have been, and that they've had over 70 meetings now. And alongside Esselina and João, we also did the same thing in 22 other locations across Africa and Asia. So in total, we've had around 1,400 community of practice meetings held over since 2016 under this program. And as well, alongside those community of practice meetings, we've also introduced the concept of having things like a WhatsApp group. So João and Esselina run them in Mozambique, and the idea being is that we're on a platform. Let's face it, we all pick up one of these, and you can see how close by mine is. We pick them up every day. So being able to actually use the devices that we use on a daily basis, part of that human-centered design that Esselina was talking about, actually we can use that to engage our community too. So the WhatsApp group is fantastic in keeping people in touch, sharing ideas, thoughts, papers, questions. And we expanded that as well by creating a global LinkedIn group. Again, with over 5,000, I think close to 6,000 members now. The idea is that we're not just actually saying you can chat with your peers in Mozambique, but we're saying you can chat with your peers about digital finance issues across the globe and learn and share those experiences. So as well as increasing both that local connection and global connection and connectivity with each other, and that really creates the concept of a digital finance profession, which was also really key here. This was new, as you talked about, so the idea that you had kind of finance on one side and digital on the other. How do we bring people together and create a really big community? So that digital finance community can include, as you said, the regulators and financial regulators and supervisors. It can include banks, M&Os, fintech, microfinance, development sector, but also, IT and lawyers who specialize in fintech. All of those people make up this community, which actually is needed to make digital finance really work. So we have that community, and alongside that, we also run some expert-led webinars. So sometimes there are topics or emerging topics or new themes or some great research that we want to learn from. And that's where the expert-led webinar series that we run at Digital Frontiers Institute comes into play, with I think around 50, 60 webinars run over the last few years. And to also help people find information and resources, we have a cultivated knowledge bank on the Digital Frontiers Institute website. So if you want to find out more about something specific, maybe it's AML CFT or humanitarian or mobile money, there are categories within that knowledge bank with over 1,500 resources that enable those professionals to search and easily find the knowledge that we want. So it's a combination, really, continuous professional development of keeping their knowledge going, right? I mean, we know that digital finance is still, changing, emerging. We're talking about central bank digital currency, which we weren't talking about 2-3 years ago, for example. So we need to keep people's skills, knowledge, information up to date, but also provide that connectivity to each other to sort of actually understand and connect and learn and share as professionals. And I think right now we're reaching a community of around 15,000 people globally. And what that looks like locally in Mozambique, we've had around 1,000 and maybe even just over that now, over 1,200 attendees attending various community of practice events and fintech association events as well. So that's a huge number of people we're now bringing together, connecting together and sharing their knowledge and skills with each other.
Sarah, and maybe Esselina, if you're back, a question for you on the role of the peer-to-peer connection, continuous professional development, and specifically the communities of practice. I mean, what I observed on the communities of practice is bringing people together around training was relatively easy versus beforehand bringing people together to talk business. was quite complex. So here we had for the first time, well, not for the first time, but here we had quite easily central bankers and regulators and policymakers sitting in the same room as banks, but also the same room as telcos, fintechs, etc. And conversations started. One of my observations around this was not only were conversations started, but problems were solved. Country level problems were solved. Policies were influenced or drafted or proposed or changed. Products were innovated, and then people had job mobility. They moved from one organization to the next, but also moved out to create new innovations and fintechs. So maybe Esselina or João, what were some of the outcomes of the actual peer-to-peer meetings, the communities of practice?
Thanks, Gavin. If I can add to what Sarah was talking about, the community of practice and the importance. For me, the community of practice is the moment that we trying to reflect and to debate what we are seeing in the course and what we are learning in the course, and then trying to reflect what does mean to our context and what we can do. The big issue or the big key points that I also still retain is that we used to invite in our community of practice also people that were not students, if I can say, were not participants of a specific course, and we invite them to present a specific topic, and for that topic sometimes end up with for us as participants of the course to have some research more, or even in the case of FSD, we identify also a space to do some more research. I'm still remembering when we had our first invitees. She was the director for the payment system and responsible for financial inclusion. She was one of our invitees from the central bank. And at that time, she was talking about the agent, the need that we need to see how the agent banking and the all agent ecosystem can improve. And from there, we at FSD, we started to do a program or a research in order to have evidence what is the agent banking mean in Mozambique and what type of model can be there. And that research contributed to the revision of the policy of the legislation that is now in that one. So you see that although we think that was necessary, but in that meeting, someone from the central bank was telling us that they want a contribution in that one, and then we find that one as an opportunity. And this is one example. I do believe that João can also bring other type of example that end up also in policy, if we can see different policy that we are suggesting. We know that this process of revising policy is not as quick as we would like, but I think the community of practice in particular is making influence for some policy and the regulation. João, I do believe that is going to talk what is going to happen from tomorrow. We have some things that we want to do in terms of how the technology for fourth generation can impact financial inclusion and what type of legislation need to be in place in order to allow financial service providers to use more and more the fourth generation. But João will talk a little bit more about us that one. Thank you.
Please, João, come in.
Okay, thank you, Esselina, and thank you, Gavin, also for the question. So let me go back a little further, saying that from the 120 more or less students that we have right now that has at least made one of the courses from Digital Frontiers, 18 are members or founders of fintech companies, new companies in Mozambique. So, and those 18 people are representing 12 Mozambique fintech companies that are starting in the last 3 years or so. So it's a changing in terms of skills inside those companies, and that's what one of our goals in terms of Fintech.MZ, the association, and I believe also FSD, is to be able to have at least the foundation courses for all the people that work in a fintech company, because I think it's changing mind, let's say, those kind of knowledge, because people are coming out of the university with a good degree in terms of engineering, in terms of software development, so on, but with none information about what is finance, and most relevant, what is digital finance, and what are the aspects in terms of also in terms of legislation, in terms of policy that must be compliance, in terms of customer protection, know your customer, regulation, things like that, that must be applied and that must be inserted or must be used, let's say, when people are innovating and when they are producing new services. Talking also about new services, as Esselina was telling a little ago, we are starting a four sessions, let's say, 4-session webinar. It's during the next 6 weeks. The general team is Industry 4.0 and the impact on financial inclusion. So we will have 4 sessions, 2 of them related to cloud services. What are the principles, the concepts, and the service that can be provided through cloud, and what will be the impact in terms of security, in terms of costs for the end customer, and also in terms of innovation that the cloud can bring to the country and to the new services. And then we will have two more sessions, one concerning blockchain and big data analysis, and the last one about artificial intelligence and development. So we invited several people from Mozambique and also from outside. We have a colleague for instance, from Ghana, that is also a digital frontier practitioner, and Krugel, he will be present at one of the sessions. So we are bringing together international capacity or skills, but most of the participants on the panels are Mozambique leaders in terms of banking companies, other financial services companies, telecommunications providers, also some government institutions. So that's another thing that we are doing, and we believe that will change also the mindset of people inside the country to develop new services and also to produce new laws or to complement the legislation available to be in place, those new technologies to be able to be used in innovations. Just let me give you another example of some kind of output or outcome that we have. Last week, we have been in a meeting concerning digital new service, digital financial services, new services. That was a meeting put together by the central bank. And it was very important and very interesting for me to listen a guy from the central banking discussing how can be implemented a blockchain solution to be connecting all the information about all financial institutions. So that's the first time that I saw from the central bank a position like that and the openness to discuss that. And let me remember that 2 years ago, or 1.5 years ago, FSD and the Digital Frontiers developed a special course for of blockchain for the central bank. So I think that's one of the outcomes that we can also measure in right now.
That's a lot of outcomes and a lot of what feels like, you know, a capacity built.
3
right?
years,
So,
the last 3 years only.
Yeah, it's a, you know, it's capabilities. It sounds like capabilities and capacity built, and it also sounds like the new frontier of digital. It's a very different conversation to what we were having 5 or 7 years ago. It's a very different level of training. It's a very different level of technology. Which just goes to Sarah and Esselina, and your point is, as we continue evolving digital for development, we actually need to continue building local capacity, local capabilities, and connecting people so that they can innovate. I have a question, Esselina and João, that comes to mind. You know, FSD Mozambique's foresight and intervention 7 years ago to recognize that there are capability gaps or capacity gaps in the market, or that bridge profession was missing. Where was academia? You know, Esselina, you had a role in academia. There was, you know, why did you need to work to create specialized content for the local market? Was this and is this still absent in tertiary education or adult education, you know, postgraduate education?
Thank you, Gavin. That question is for me very crucial because the space sometimes for some academians to move on to this new way of creating specific courses are not quick as we intend. But I am one of the believers that all this new technology, this new way of skills that are required, the academians need to not to lose their ears and also preparing the future generation. And I do believe that this process should be done in two ways, not just bottom up, but also down to the top. When I'm calling down top is in the case that we need those skills. We need to influence and also to stick to the academia, say, you see that there is here a need. I do believe that this is already starting. Gavin, last week, I was surprised to see one student from one university in the north of the country presenting a results of a study that was doing, a research that was doing, using machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to detect messages that are coming from the telephone, that that message potential to be a message, and for that information, the way to send a message to the world about this message is it seems that it's process also sending the provided to now in the technology for them, but I think that's also starting.
Esselina, we're losing you again, but I think the message was clear, is that, you know, academia isn't quite at the frontier, and perhaps rather wait for these professions to establish, settle down, and for there to be a significant enough body of knowledge or skills transfer to establish programs is what I took from what you were saying. Sarah, I wonder then if we can bring you in here once more and just talk about, is what we're seeing in Mozambique, is what we're seeing replicable? Maybe, yeah, is it replicable? Where else are we seeing this? And where...
May I conclude?
Hi, are you back? Yes, conclude,
Yes,
Esselina, thank you.
May I conclude? I was giving that example for that student for one university in the north, but I cannot say that now I'm seeing that even PG students they are now interested in do that. I do have at the moment one PhD student that, by the way, she's almost finishing the DFI certificate, and she wants to do her research on in the side of the risk that are coming from the digital financial service. And at the same time, she's a supervisor at the central bank. So you see, she's already a certificate. She wants to do a PhD around the digital financial service, looking for the risks that are related. So you see that now there are coming new areas of research that were not some years ago. So yes, there are some examples that are changing. And I do believe that in the near future, for sure, the university are going to start to offer some courses related to that area. Thank you. So, sorry for my internet. I am at the office. I don't know what's going on. Now I'm using my phone. Sorry about that.
Not to worry, Esselina. We got the message. We got the message clear. And that is, exciting to see PhD students in Mozambique starting to focus on researching and solving some of the challenges that we face in inclusive finance, but also in digital development. Sarah, the question that I posed is this replicable?
Well, I know, I hope it is. So when we look at our digital finance community, Mozambique is one of 22 locations where we have a community of practice, and there are 13 others who've also formed a digital finance association. So what our communities of practice have done is basically put into people's minds the idea that coming together, talking, interacting, sharing, learning together is actually bringing about change. And that change that started, those examples that Esselina and João shared, actually really galvanize people to want to do something bigger and actually really more effectively and efficiently contribute to that change. And from those communities of practice, we've started to see digital finance associations being registered, Fintech, Mozambique being one of them, and there are others too. And we are really beginning to see that, that those associations are making local impact, whether that's capacity building, influencing regulations, research. There are many things that those associations are doing. And it was actually those digital finance associations that drove the formation of where I am now CEO of, which is the Alliance of Digital Finance Associations. So as these in-country digital finance associations were forming, it was clear from them, it was a request from them, definitely a push upwards concept that actually wanting to belong to something that was global, as well as local. And it's that kind of that we talked about, it was really important, the global and local connectivity really is the key here. So that was how the Alliance of Digital Finance Associations started, and that only launched last year. And I'm really excited to see what journey that will take us through in terms of both promoting local capacity, continuing the capacity building and being the voice of the digital finance profession. And not only are we stopping at digital finance, well, at Digital Frontiers, we're also experimenting and moving now into the field of gender equity. We have a wonderful gender equity course, and alongside course is communities of practice, and of course Esselina features there again as a gender community of practice facilitator along with some of the other FSD Mozambique team. And we are very much hoping that those gender equity community of practices will also then go on to form gender equity associations within countries, and then we'll have something similar to the Alliance for Digital Finance for Gender. And then if we can do it in gender, then I believe that we can then start opening doors for many other professions, links, things like inclusive digital economies, digital health, and other things that are going to come out from the SDG goals. And we're going to see new professions emerging, new bridges being needed between different worlds as our world digitizes and hopefully becomes a more fair and equitable place. And I'm really excited about the importance of community, that those, whether it's an association, a community of practice, or people just getting together, we know that if you provide a safe and an attractive place for people to come together, to share, to learn, to innovate, to inspire together, that's where change comes from. And we're really excited to be part of that process.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's get some questions from the audience out before I wrap up. João, probably for you, but Esselina, of course, do step in here. A little bit more context about digital development in Mozambique coming from the audience. What is the local infrastructure to allow digital development and progress, especially for small and medium-sized businesses or organizations? So specifically in terms of internet affordability, accessibility, and bandwidth. And then a follow-on question to say, is the local government engaged in supporting, strengthening this infrastructure, or its development is solely dependent on private sector investment? So give us a little bit of context, perhaps from a fintech perspective, how does fintech succeed based on the infrastructure that's in Mozambique, and what's being done to advance it?
Thank you, Gavin. Well, talking about infrastructures, let me say that there was a huge progress in the last 2 or 3 years, but there is still something to do. But we have access to internet all over the country. We have 3 mobile operators, telecommunication operators that are present in all the country. So internet will be available in most of the cities, village, and small towns. So there is no problem in terms of access. Also, the energy in terms of electricity is also moving around all the country. So I believe that in the next few years, all the 100% of the places in the country will have energy. So that's the basic in terms of infrastructures. But also talking about the digital or about financial infrastructures, we have a central switch for interbank interoperability. There is also moving from legacy systems to a new system. So I believe that in this year we will have also new software and the openness to develop new services on top of them. But let me say that Mozambique is one of the most advanced countries in terms of digital services on ATMs, on POSs. We have, for instance, we can pay with mobile money M-Pesa in a traditional POS instead of using the bank card. We can make payments of services in all ATMs in the country. We can buy energy and things like that. So we have also a very strong mobile money network operations. More than 60% of the population in Mozambique, we are talking about 60 million of people, adult people. 60% of that people have at least one mobile money account, and 30% have a bank account. So there is a gap that we must also cover in the next future. But let's say that we have in place all the means and all the technology, let's say, or all the infrastructure for a company that can come to the country and start to develop those services, innovative service. Let me tell you that from our 23 members in terms of fintech associations, 3 of them are international, 4 of them are international companies. Like, for instance, Flutterwave is the biggest fintech company in Africa, as you may know. So we are assisting in the last year, 1 year more or less, we are seeing that most of international companies are coming to Mozambique. So they are coming here because there is a place to make new business and to innovate and to bring other services to the country. So I think that this will come to your question, but I can have more in the next.
No, I think that answers the question well. Esselina, did you have something to add?
I want to add to a second part of the question, that is this infrastructure only a role for the private sector, or is also what the government is doing? Really, the government is the main provider of those infrastructure, particularly when it comes to energy and also to telecommunication. And the government has itself compromised that by 2030, all districts in the country, they have to have energy. And now they are using not only the normal energy, but also they use the renewable energy in some of the place. The other signal from the government, from my point of view, is that the government has a digital strategy for economy. The government wanted to digitalize the economy in Mozambique. And the digital financial service is part of this digitalization of the economy, and is having a big project that we do believe that we are going to see some transformation in that component. And for me, those are the signal for the government. But I can also show in the site of the regulator, the telecom is also doing some significant signal that you want to go to digital, but also the central bank with the creation of the sandbox is also a signal that he really, as João was saying, is really seeing the potential of using digital to all activity that a regulator can do. So thank you.
Thanks, Esselina and João. There is another question there for Esselina and for Sarah. Esselina, is the local COP open to anyone in Mozambique to participate in?
The COP, the nature is for the one that are taking the course. If you have done any course for DFI, it is open. For other that didn't take the course, we used to invite them when we do alumni. We do have alumni where we bring anyone that have been participating, and that's who we invite other. For instance, those sessions that João was mentioned, that the first one will be tomorrow, it's not only open to alumni, but it's open to others. So you can, anyone that you want to participate in the debate with us, when we have those alumni can come and discuss with us. It's a really open space. Thank you.
And Sarah, where else are there communities of practice?
We have in other countries across Africa and Asia. So we have, for example, Bangladesh, we have Pakistan, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Ethiopia. I'm sure I've missed somebody off, and I'll stop there before I miss one country and they'll be very upset with me. But as you can see, there are very many. Sometimes those communities of practice meet face to face, usually in the capital city of those countries. But sometimes they are events that are held online. So even if you're not in any of those countries, as Esselina was saying, when there's a Zoom call, your people can sort of join in from anywhere across the world. I've shared with in the chat there a link to the Digital Frontiers Institute website where all the communities are listed. And on that website link as well, you'll also find access to past and upcoming webinars that we've run and the knowledge bank. And there's also a link there to the LinkedIn group. And I highly recommend that people watching that are really interested join that LinkedIn group, because that's where we share, for example, João and Esselina's Mozambique meetings, the DFI webinars. There's opportunities that are shared there. It's actually one of LinkedIn's most engaged groups. We have a huge engagement there, and LinkedIn themselves have sort of recognized us. So it's a great group. If you're part of that, you'll also see all the opportunities that are happening in communities of practice and with Digital Frontiers, and also the Alliance. And I know that João has also shared the link to the Fintech Mozambique website too, and his email and my email. So if people want to get in touch and be part of our communities, please do. We'd really love to have you.
Thank you. So let me maybe just wrap up, just checking there's no more questions coming from the audience yet. So let me just wrap up in feeding back what I've heard. Capacity gaps exist in the local context, specifically capacity gaps linked to digital development and anything related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we don't solve for those capacity gaps in a comprehensive and intentional way, we're not going to progress in any of these topics. Building capabilities requires a lot more than just training. It requires continuous professional development. It requires linkages to peers in markets, cross-sector, cross-organizations, and it requires linkages to peers in the global context so that we can learn from other countries. But also, the word is continuous professional development. It requires continuous learning. So for us to constantly evolve and strengthen local capacity as industry evolves and as topics and technologies get introduced, it's important that we have, we're one step ahead of the frontier in a way, that we're building capabilities on the ground. And then what we heard is how FSD Mozambique and DFI's intervention 7 years ago has led to significant outcomes around policy, outcomes around innovation, new fintech companies formed and innovations introduced into the market, and a deepening of the conversation from what was interesting technology 5 to 7 years ago to what is now new and frontier technology. So thank you, Esselina, for the vision and foresight 7 years ago. Thank you, João, who has played such a critical role in both the COP, or thank you both, in both the communities of practice and in bringing students to the training and building the capacity locally. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing your passion on continuous professional development and the importance of going beyond the classroom. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.